I love everything about Portland, even the Trailblazers. Actually, I was back in 2000 when the Lakers won their first of 3 that year. I know. No, but I always feared the Trailblazers because they were always so good. And I was at the Forum, and it was Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Lakers were down by 14, and it was the fourth quarter. And I was upset, I was depressed, and I was walking out, and if you remember, it was actually, the Forum. There's TV monitors, and I was watching the monitors, and I saw that we were only down by 8, and then I ran back in there. It was just the greatest experience I've ever had. Anyway, so we're here to talk about business and marketing. Thank you again for having me. Thank you, Portland State University, for having me. It's been great. I had a great time this last couple of hours, met some fantastic people. Today I'm going to talk about social business. And when we think about marketing, 9 times out of 10 we're thinking about Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these different channels to grow our communities. And the idea of social business is a lot different. And I'm going to explain to it in detail over the next 45 minutes. But first, don't judge me. I am a recovering direct marketer. And what I mean by that is throughout my entire career, when I thought about customers, 9 times out of 10, I would think about how I can get them to download a white paper or purchase a product or do something to convert them. And as I kind of matured in my walk and realized that customers do not want to be referred to as target audience, segments, or web users, I began to change my thinking. And when I think that as a customer, they want to feel they're people with passions. There are things that they care about, there are things that they don't care about, or that they don't care about, and that's really what drives the relationship between them and a brand. And so when I talk to teams or clients about social media, I always keep in the back of my head that we're talking to real people. These are customers. These are people who can have significant business value if you treat them correctly. So I'm going to talk about the social customer and the impact that they have on business today, large or small, it doesn't matter. This is an evolution that I see. And if you look back in 1995 when Al Gore first invented the internet, the social customer has been gaining influence. But the reality is that we're all social customers. I remember as a child, my mom would be in the living room talking about the brands that were important to her. I specifically remember brands like Ovaltine and Palmolive and Arm & Hammer, and they're still around today. I remember my mom telling my aunt, use Palmolive and your hands they feel like lotion after you wash dishes. But the reality is those conversations still happen today, right? It's nothing new. Right? They're just amplified all over the internet. They're in Google. They're on Google+. They're on Yelp. They're on CNET. They're on Best Buy forums. They're on Amazon. They're everywhere. And so what happened was, and these dates can certainly be argued, but this is just kind of a timeline. In 2003, on or around, brands began to realize the significance and importance of the social customer. So they created, MySpace pages and Friendster pages and then Facebook and Twitter. But they didn't realize and they didn't plan accordingly. They spent a lot of time building these channels and 0 time building an infrastructure. And if you look at 2008 to present, companies realize that because of all these external communication tools that we have, it's caused chaos internally. I'm going to talk through those in a minute. But so from 2008 to present, a lot of companies are now focusing less on building external communities, more on building out their infrastructure. And I'll talk about what that means in a minute. So I talked about who the social customer is. We are all social customers. And the reality is the role that we have every day, our journey on the social web is dynamic. So this is me, the right-hand corner, right? Every day I wake up, I pull out my iPhone or I get on my computer, and I Google everything. I bank at US Bank. The first thing I do when I want to check my statements is I Google US Bank, click on the link, log in. I use Gmail. I Google Gmail, click on the link, log in. Does anybody else do that as well? Okay, I don't use bookmarks. I just Google everything. It is our homepage for everything. So I live my life every day walking through my life, and I'm getting emails from colleagues, I'm getting emails from clients, I'm getting text messages from my wife, I'm getting, I'm checking my RSS feeds, I'm looking at my Twitter stream, I'm looking at my Facebook wall, seeing what's going on in Google+. I am consistently all over the place, and it's different every day. So what I normally do in order to, because there's only 24 hours in one day, is I want to make sure that I only consume relevant content. So what do? In Twitter, I use Twitter lists. Anybody else use lists in Twitter? I live in my lists. I don't follow my home feed. I live in certain lists that I follow when I want something specific. If I want the news, I follow that list. If I want sports, I follow that list. Google+, right? Circles, it's the same thing. I put people and I categorize people in circles based on the content that they share. So we put up these dashboards in our minds so that we can only consume content that's important to us at a given time. So let me give you a quick example. About 6 years ago, I refinanced my house. And when I was on my way to work, driving down 101, I would consistently see billboard advertisements with interest rates, Quicken Loans. I would see email advertisements. I would see banners online. I would search for stuff, and I would just find these random links. The minute that I refinanced my home, all of those ads went away. But the reality is they didn't go away. They just weren't relevant to me anymore, so I haven't seen them. I don't see them anymore. The challenge for brands or small business is you are not only competing for the mind share of the customers with competitors, you're competing with just the madness of being a social customer, that dynamic life that they live every day. So how do you reach them? How do you break through that clutter? Now, we've all heard the term, content is king. Has anybody else heard that? Everyone, right? But when I think about content, I think about the right content at the right time, in the right channel, to the right customer. So you're having a one-on-one conversation with the customer, even though you're talking to many. Okay? This is the way the customer interacts with the brand. Now, it's not a linear progression because, we all kind of adapt to our experiences differently. One minute we care about the brand, the next minute we're cursing them, right? Depending upon our experience. But at the very top is me or us very early on in the internet world, right? We simply used social media or maybe just Google to research for products. My mom is someone who's here and she hasn't really left, right? She doesn't want to engage with brands. She just wants to look up for, HP laptop or Dell laptop review, and she'll read reviews and buy products. Now, naturally, if I'm a brand and I'm investing X number of dollars in paid media, X number of dollars in search and social, I want to try to move that person who's just researching products down to the bottom, being an advocate, right? So the next phase is the 3 Fs, right? Friends, fans, and followers. Now the problem is, and this is a problem with many of my clients, is that they say, you know what, Edelman, we want 1 million fans by Q3 2012. And the fact of the matter is, we can get that for them. It's very easy. I mean, if you have money, you can pay for those fans. But there's so much more opportunity if you invest the time with relevant content and be more human. You can move them down this through engagement to become advocates. Does anybody know what the difference is between an advocate and an influencer? Just raise your hand if you know the difference. Well, before I talk about the purchase funnel, I'm going to quickly talk about the differences between an advocate and an influencer. When I think about an influencer, I think of somebody like Robert Scoble, right? He's a tech guy, several thousand followers. When he talks about new startups or entrepreneurs, people listen. Also, Chris Pirillo, he's a Seattle guy. He talks about the same thing. These are people that have significant reach, and when they talk about a product or a service, people listen. Now, not them specifically, but for the most part, the relationship between a brand or small business and an influencer is built on incentives. Meaning, you keep sending me products, or you send me to CES, and I'm going to continue to blog about your products. The problem with that is that the minute you stop sending gifts or products, either monetary value or not, usually the conversation stops. Now, advocates, on the other hand, may not have thousands of followers. They may only have a couple hundred. But they're talking about the brand or the product because there's an emotional equity assigned to it. Now, I don't know about you. Does anybody here fly to Canada often? I use Air Canada. Now, when I tell people I'm an advocate of Air Canada, people laugh. But I love Air Canada. I love their entertainment system. They're hardly late. You know, they don't have the greatest customer service, but as long as I can get videos and I don't have to pay for them, that's fine. I've tweeted Air Canada many times. I've said, hey, just checked in on Air Canada, can't wait, just got here to Toronto. They've never once interacted with me, and that's okay. As long as they continue to provide good service and their experience is positive for me, that's all that matters. So I'm an advocate. So there's a disconnect with whoever's managing Air Canada to see what is the conversation, who's talking about it. Let's create some advocate programs, right? Because the relationship between an advocate and a brand or small business is built on trust, it's built on loyalty, and there's emotion assigned to it. Okay, so when we think about the purchase funnel, right, it's awareness, preference, purchase, consideration, purchase, loyalty. We've spent, in corporate America, we spend millions of dollars trying to figure out what the messaging is at each of these phases. We create metrics models at each of these phases. We have to have our messages go through brand approval so that we can post them up on a press release or on a corporate website. But the truth of the matter is that the purchase model, in my opinion, is changing. Have any of us in this room today been influenced to purchase something or not based on somebody else's recommendation? I mean, how many of us have decided not to fly on a certain airline because somebody said, you know what, Southwest sucks? I actually like Southwest. But my point is that we're consistently being influenced by other people. Let me give you a quick example. Jason, and this is a real true story. Jason Alpin, he's at Jason Alpin on Twitter. He's a guy, he's based in San Diego, now in New York. I ran into him at a conference about 2 years ago. Bless you. And he pulls out this phone. He's like, check out my new phone, man. He pulls it out. It was a Samsung Captivate Android. And it's slightly thinner than an iPhone. It's a little bit slightly bigger. And he was multitasking. He was doing all these great things. Now, it just so happened that my contract with my iPhone 3GS was about to expire. So what did I do? What do you think I did? I went to get the Samsung. Worst freaking mistake of my life, because the Samsung is a horrible phone. And that's a true story. I spent 1.5 years with a phone that I didn't like based on a friend's recommendation. Now, I don't trust him anymore, okay? And I just got my iPhone back. But it's a true story. We are consistently influenced by others to purchase things or not based on what other people are saying and their experiences. So, do we all have a basic understanding of what the social customer is, right? We're all social customers. Going back to that timeline, right, where it was the customer, the brand, and the business, this is an example of a social brand, right? These are 3 companies, and there are many more, right? We have Starbucks, eBay, and Dell. These are companies that have significant presence or several, quote-unquote, social channels to engage with customers. And quite frankly, I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, any company, whether they're doing it good or bad, if they're trying to connect with customers through social media, they're a social brand. Now, I'm not the type of guy that's going to say, you know what, Dell doesn't do it right. Or, you know what, Intel, they're not doing it right. Because every company is learning. They're learning, they're making mistakes, of course, but they're learning and they're progressing, they're changing their business. Quite simply, a social brand is any company, product, even politicians or consultants who are using Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, whatever it is, to connect with customers. Okay, the intention is there, and they're trying. But this has caused a significant amount of chaos in an organization. Okay, large, small, it doesn't matter. How many times, in fact, I challenge you to Google social media policy, or better yet, social media fired, or social media Facebook fired, or something along those lines. There are cases after cases after cases of people, of employees being fired for what they tweet about or share on Facebook. The key takeaway of this slide is don't talk smack about your manager on Facebook. You can get fired. Whether or not you agree with that or not, there's litigation happening right now in federal court about cases involving privacy and freedom of speech and social media. It's happening today. In fact, the National Labor Relations Board just released a case study where they've identified 14 cases of people getting fired. One of them was a woman who was an ambulance driver for AMR. And she didn't like her boss, and she went to her wall and she said, "My boss is an idiot. How did he get promoted?" She isn't even friends with him. Other people chime in. He finds out. She gets fired. Okay, it's happening all the time. Okay, so this may seem all like common sense, but unfortunately, not everyone has common sense. They're tweeting stupid. I've tweeted stupid things. Okay, so here's a quick example. This is one study. 76% of companies do not have a defined social media policy. Now, I was fortunate enough to work for a company who was one of the first. In fact, my colleague, Brian Rhodes here, a good friend of mine, was kind of the guy behind it who published the social media policies and guidelines for Intel and made them public. But still today, 76% of companies do not have defined policies. So you can't really blame employees and partners and whoever for posting questionable content. Because if you look at it holistically, social media is still new. We may have been doing it for 3, 5, 7 years, but for the most part, if you take a step back and just look at the entire spectrum, it's a brand new thing, and we're learning consistently. There's also a land grab for ownership. How many in this room believe or feel that social media should report into a PR function? Raise your hand. What about marketing? A few. Support? Okay. The reality is it's all over the board, right? Some companies are struggling with it. They have multiple Facebook pages, multiple Twitter handles, and internally there's chaos. And the fact of the matter is, this has a significant effect on morale. If I walk into a job every day and I don't know what I'm responsible for, or I don't know what I'm being measured against, and my manager can't tell me, then there's a problem. I don't feel valued, or perhaps I don't know exactly what to do every day, so I'm, spending my time just tweeting all day. There's an issue there. So there's a significant land grab for social media. Now, Jeremiah Oyang, who works for Altimeter, says, and I strongly believe this, and I think we'll get there shortly, someday, but that is that social media should not be 100% of one team or one person's job. It should be 10% of everyone's job, or 5%. There's zero collaboration. So what this means is that marketing doesn't talk to PR. PR doesn't talk to marketing. The regions, or if you're a global company, they're kind of off doing their own thing. They're creating microsites, and they're not talking with corporate. What happens is that you have inconsistent messages. You have multiple channels. You have multiple Twitter accounts. Zero consistency in messaging. And that causes problems. If I'm a customer and I want to friend you in Facebook and you're a brand, and I do a search for you in Facebook and I find 20 different pages, how do I know which is the legit one? How do I know which page to join to communicate with you? If you have multiple pages, it's a problem. There's a spelling error on this slide. I'm sorry. Inconsistency is spelled wrong. Now, I suck at math. I'm not going to tell you how to do social media measurement. The point is that if PR is measuring it one way and marketing is measuring it the other way, or if you're not measuring it at all, how do you know if you're being effective? Okay? There's a lot of books out there. There's blog posts. There's infographics. There's a lot of resources that you can use to figure out how you want to measure social. Is it simply conversation volume? Is it share of voice? Is it engagement or community health? Tweets, retweets, RSS subscribers, etc. Or do you want to get more complex and do metrics around the purchase funnel? It doesn't matter. The point is that it needs to be consistent for everyone that's doing social media at your company. Also, companies aren't prepared for a crisis. Does anybody remember what happened to Kenneth Cole and what they did during the riots in Egypt? Right? They posted something on Twitter, or they actually posted a signage on their wall and on Twitter, kind of mocking people in Egypt during the protests there. They got slammed for it. And it took them quite some time for them to respond. So what that tells me is that they didn't have a crisis communication plan. Okay? What is a crisis communications plan? It's simply a plan that you activate when there's a potential crisis. It could mean pulling in certain people. It could mean having press releases ready. It could mean preparing a blog post and posting it on Facebook. It just depends. Global scalability is certainly difficult. How many in here work for like a global company? Okay, none. I'll skip this slide then. Okay. Marketing is making technology decisions. Marketing people do not make technology decisions. Okay? That needs to come from IT. Now, you can collaborate with IT, right? They're the experts. They know what type of applications you have on your intranet. They know what type of community applications you have installed. They know if WordPress works with Java or if WordPress works with PeopleSoft or whatever it is. Get them involved in the decisions before making technology purchases. Okay, now the good stuff. This is a study by Altimeter, and basically they interviewed several company executives, and they said, what are your goals for 2012? Now, you're going to notice that it's not building Facebook applications, it's not increasing communities, it's not growing Twitter followers, it's all of the internal stuff, right? It's the policies, it's the training, it's establishing a measurement framework, it's ROI, it's things like that. When I think about governance or corporate governance, I kind of classify them in three buckets. There's governance and policies, there's rules of engagement, and there's organizational stuff, right? This is kind of boring, so I'm not going to get into it, but this is what companies today are spending their time on because they're trying to figure out how they can scale correctly internally first before they focus on the external, okay? When we think about measurement, here's a quick snapshot of different ways that you can measure based on attention, engagement, authority, influence, and sentiment, and different data points that you can measure based on what channel you're using. So if you're using Facebook, it might just be unique users and page views, or it could be community growth month to month, things like that. And by the way, I'll make these slides available to anyone who's interested. So that brings up to my next point, and this is kind of the last part of it. This is the idea of what a social business is, okay? It's about the people of the organization, leadership, employees, partners, establishing, governance, etc. It's about policies and procedures, and it's about technology. When these three things work together in unison, I feel that companies are in this kind of this phase of organizational readiness, right? They have the executive buy-in, they have the support financially, they have the support from executive leadership, they're collaborating internally, they're prepared to have significant and scalable conversations with customers. Then they have the policies and procedures, right? They know how to act. They're not going to act like idiots on the web. They know what they should be engaged in. They know what type of conversations to engage in. And then the technology is going to help facilitate all that. And here's a quick definition of social business. Okay? Pretty self-explanatory. Now, here's an interesting graphic here. We've talked about the idea of a social brand, right? All of the things that we do as a company to communicate with customers. Events, Facebook, Twitter, campaigns, customer support. And then we've talked about the business side of it, the internal stuff, the training, the process, all the boring stuff. But in order for you to see measurable results, these two things need to be working together in unison. How many of here use Comcast? Is Comcast a cable provider here in Portland? Who is unhappy with Comcast? Raise your hand. The majority. Who's happy with Comcast? Anyone? I like Comcast. I've never had a problem with Comcast. Now, if I did, I could probably go to Twitter and type in, hey, where's your technician? They're late. What would happen? Anybody? I would probably get a tweet back and say, oh, DM us your account number and we'll expedite the technician. I did a little research project. About a week ago, I looked up Comcast on Twitter. And 60% of the results were people complaining that technicians were either late or didn't show up. Now, I bet that Comcast responded to each and every one of those people. Right? I mean, I write about them in the book. They're in every blog post about support. They're in a lot of case studies. They're known for handling customer support issues online. But what are they doing on the business side of it? I wonder if they hired like a Six Sigma expert to come in and say, you know what, from the time that a customer calls into support and says, I need cable television or I need a new DVR, from the time that support agent puts in that request into the queue on whatever system that they have, to the next morning when the technician walks in and picks up his schedule and says, okay, and planning his route, there's a disconnect in that process. So Comcast, yeah, they're doing great handling customer support issues. They're not doing anything to change their business. And this is my point, that the business operations, R&D, process, listening, and action need to be working in unison with the external communications. Does that make sense? Okay. When I think about social media and social business, I look at it through three different lenses. From the customer's perspective, they provide value to the brand by what? Buying our products, right? That's market share, it's revenue. They also indirectly sell our products through advocacy, telling others. And whether or not we're listening, they are providing us with feedback about our business. Okay? Now, if the brand is smart, or the way that we communicate with customers, hopefully they're listening to the customer. Now, studies show that customers want to engage with brands, okay? So simply by engaging and responding in a two-way dialogue is value back to the customer. And the reality is a lot of customers just want discounts. They're going to friend your page or follow you on Twitter because they want a discount from you. They can care nothing about the relationship. They want a discount, and that's okay. Or relevant content. If I tweet that I need a driver to a piece of software, or if I tweet that I'm lost, I need directions to the nearest restaurant, and they respond, is that value to me? Yes, it is. Now, looking at it from the business perspective, how many of us how many of us like Starbucks? Now, I personally like Pete's, okay? I like Pete's in the summer, Starbucks in the winter. It's just how I do it. Now, you know the little green sticks? Anybody know what they're called? If you can tell me in 2 seconds without Googling it, I will buy you coffee after this. Yes, it was. But it's a splash stick. And their site, My Starbucks Idea, built on Salesforce, was a customer saying, I'm going to help you with this because if you're like me, every time I wear a white shirt, I spill coffee right here. I have a hole right in the bottom of my chin. So not only did they create advocacy, but they've innovated their products based on what customers are saying. So what is the value back to the customer? Satisfaction, loyalty. Listening to the customer without any action is worse than listening at all. I firmly believe that. Think about it. You're probably asking, what do dirty socks have to do with this? How many of us are married or in a relationship? Okay, there's 50%. Yeah, thank you for the lights. Those of you who are single, stand up, look around. You guys maybe can hook up. Kidding. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I work late at night, watch SportsCenter downstairs, have my laptop, take off my socks, leave them on the living room floor. Happens a lot. It happened a lot early in my marriage. And I've been married for 13 years, by the way. So very early on, in the morning, my wife would say, honey, do me a favor. It doesn't take a lot of effort to pick up your socks and put them in the hamper before you go to bed. Now, I know that none of you have the same problem, right? This is just me. It's just my household. Anyway, so the next night, I go downstairs and I get on my laptop and I'm working, and I leave my socks, again, on the living room floor. Now, can you imagine the discontent that would cause if I never changed my behavior? My wife has trained me pretty well, okay? I no longer leave socks on the floor. I no longer leave cupboards open. I always put the toilet seat down, okay? These are things that I've learned as a single man going into a marriage that I've learned, and I listen to my wife's feedback. Same thing for business. Same thing for business. If you promise customers things and you never follow through, it's the same thing as leaving dirty socks on the living room floor. Let me give you an example. Sometimes it's the not-so-small things, right? How many of us are still Netflix customers? And I'm going to be honest, I still am. Just there's no other alternative. I love Netflix. But they lost almost 1 million customers over the last 3 months because of what they did. They increased their prices and did not increase the value. And they communicated it to us in a not-so-good way. They're confused. They're starting new business and brand, and then they're going back. They don't know what they're doing, okay? But they're not listening to the social customer. And the social customer is influential. Look at their stock price. 1 million customers. What about Bank of America? So they were they wanted to increase their revenue, so they decided to charge their current customers $5 a month for using debit cards. Now, this is not a big deal, because most other banks already do charge you $5 a month. But the way that they communicated it was not right. And what happened? There was a petition by MoveOn.org. They had like 100,000 signatures. I did a search in Twitter, and I also did a search in Scout Labs, which is a monitoring tool. And there were literally, I want to say like 300,000 or 400,000 tweets reaching almost 12 or 13 million people in the course of a month and a half based on what they wanted to do. Now, the difference between Bank of America and Netflix is that Bank of America actually listened to what we were saying. About a week and a half or maybe 3 weeks ago, they decided not to charge us $5 a month. Okay? So they're listening and taking action. And I talked about this. Okay? Action speaks louder than words. Now, whether you're a small business or you work in an enterprise firm or you're a consultant, you have to treat customers as you would your spouse. You know what I mean, okay? They are people, they have expectations, and hopefully they have some level of emotional tie or affinity towards your business or towards your brand. If you can change your mindset when you plan your marketing campaigns and you're not just focused on acquisition all the time. You know, there's an interesting book, and it was published before its time. It's called Permission Marketing by Seth Godin. It came out over a decade ago. And the idea was that you build your community first, establish trust, and then figure out how to monetize it. Okay? If you go into your campaigns and your programs and just social media in general with that mindset, I guarantee you will be successful. I guarantee it. Because this is what we want. Think about it from the customer's perspective. Now, most of you got a book. I think we still have extra books, but we have 15 minutes, and I purposely wanted to finish early because I wanted to, leave it open for questions from any of you. So thank you for having me. I thank you for inviting me here, although it's freezing. And this is all I have. So I plan to be back again soon, but I guess we can open it up for questions.
She'll have to. So you can use it. Sure.
I don't have a mic. I need one. So, first question here is, how do you enlist brand evangelists in crisis communications?
Ooh. That's interesting. Well, the first thing is you have to have an advocate program. Okay, so how do you find advocates? It's actually not that hard to do. If you have money, you can use a tool like Simply Measured. They're a startup in Seattle. They're like 5 guys in a garage. And you can do like listening of your owned media. And it'll tell you who is commenting the most, who is retweeting the most, who is liking and sharing the most of your content on Facebook and Twitter. And it'll give you a report and say, John Smith on Facebook has retweeted your or has liked your content 30 times. So it's easy to find advocates. You can also use a tool called Zuberance. There's another tool called FanCorp, F-A-N-C-O-R-P-S. It's a CMS system that allows you to pull in advocates and amplify them. So the first thing you need to do is establish an advocate program and find the advocates. And then once you have the advocates, you can then ask them to do things. What I love about FanCorp is that if you invite a group of advocates into the system, you can ask them, hey, I have this infographic that I want you to share on your blog. Who wants to do it? And they have a gamification system built around it, so they're kind of competing against each other. And if they earn X number of points, you can send them a discount or you can send them new products or whatever it is. So there's a gaming element assigned to it. But the first thing is you have to build a program, and that requires finding advocates first. Then you can ask them to do whatever you want, and they'll do it.
All right. So the next one here is, how do you work to bridge departments within an organization?
That requires what I would call, it kind of has to happen from the bottom up and the top down. You have to have like a change agent, somebody who, doesn't matter what department they're in. It doesn't matter if they're in their marketing or PR or in the business unit, but they need to prove the business value of enterprise collaboration or communication internally. At the same time, you have to have executives not just saying, we believe in collaboration, go meet face to face. They need to actually change their behavior. If the CEO says, we want to become a social organization, yet is still having his admin write up an executive communication and sent out through a memo, there's a disconnect. The CEO doesn't necessarily, or whoever, the owner of the company, doesn't necessarily have to be on Twitter, but if they want their company to change their behavior, they need to change their behavior first.
All right. Another one here came in. What are some of the common rules of engagement?
Common rules of engagement, I mean, it would depend, obviously, but I would say, be human. When Brian Rhodes here works for Intel, I relate more to Brian Rhodes than I do Intel. Okay, so Brian is like the human face or the human element of the brand Intel. For Dell, when I think of Dell, I think of a good friend of mine named Richard. He's Richard at Dell. So the rules of engagement for Richard is that he's just a real person, and everything that he shares isn't always about Dell. In fact, I think he's 50-50. 50 is industry stuff, it's answering questions, it's support. The other 50 is all Dell stuff. So having kind of a variety of different content, it's not always about you. We tell our clients, one of them is Adobe, we say, look, you don't have to create a ton of content. Highlight customer content. Let's find some great tutorials that people are creating on their own blogs. Let's share that on Facebook. Let's share that on Twitter. So remember, it's about relevant content. And relevant content doesn't always mean it has to come from the brand or from you. It can come from other people. You're just the curator. You're aggregating content and you're sharing it with the community. I would also say, don't engage in a conversation that you know nothing about, because people will find out and you'll look stupid. If I'm an expert on data centers and I try to have a conversation about lawnmowers and it doesn't make sense. Unless, of course, I'm asking a question like, hey, I'm going to buy a lawnmower, which kind should I buy? But if you're working for a company with multiple products, make sure that you're engaging in those conversations that you're an expert in.
I've got another one here. How has the idea of influence evolved in recent years?
Huge topic. Anybody here obsessed with their clout score? How many times do you check it a day? Once a week? Okay, that's not too bad. I have colleagues who check it daily. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly one element of influence. The fact of the matter is we all have influence, okay? And it's more important to find out who has influence in a certain topical area. So Chris Brogan, highly influential guy in small business. Everybody love Chris? Love Chris. Chris is a good friend. But if I work for Snapfish or Shutterfly, and I'm looking for influencers who make, cards, photo cards, or knitting, or whatever it is, Chris Brogan might not be the guy. He might be, but he might not be. So it's important to find the influencers that are influential and experts in that product, within that vertical, or within that topical area. If I'm trying to find an influencer in data centers, I'm not going to try to find a social media influencer. I'm going to find an IT guy who works for a company, who's an expert, who may not have 1 million followers, but who's highly trusted and highly influential. I do feel that when we think about influence, too many times we equate it, and it kind of touches in on our egos. And so I'm very, I try to counsel clients and say, look, let's sign you up for cloud, but let's use it as a benchmark. Because cloud is one mechanism. So if you're 44 on Monday, and the following Monday you're 52, then obviously you're doing something right. You're engaging, you're responding, you're gaining followers, you're engaging, you're responding, you're gaining followers. So it's kind of a benchmark to see that you're doing the right thing. We have another tool at Edelman called Tweet Level. Go to tweetlevel.com, and you can actually type in a search word like data center, or you can type in a search word like computer or social media, and it'll tell you who the top influencers are within that vertical. And that's a good place to start, right? And you might want to cross-reference that with cloud scores as a way to kind of gauge influence.
Do we have any more questions?
Well, I think as we progress in society, and as the Facebook generation begins to get promoted, and become it's going to be a lot easier to do that. But I think you do start small. I mean, one client that we have, they do data centers, and they wanted to start allowing employees to engage. So we decided to create a curriculum and only start with 10 people. So we handpicked 10 people, we trained them, we gave them the tools, we told them how to engage online, we helped them, we identified articles that they can respond, answer questions, we gave them content to share, and what was 10 is now 175. And that took 6 months with about 16,000 employees. So it's not a huge organization, but it's fairly large. And so we started small, and the executives there saw the value, they saw the sentiment of the brand-related conversations increasing. They saw, better yet, they saw the sentiment of, we call it topical share of voice, meaning if you're in the business of data centers, and we did an analysis of what are all the conversations about data centers, what's the total volume? Let's just say that there's 1.5 million conversations of data centers in a variety of different channels. And then we said, okay, we're going to see of those 1.5 million conversations, how many people are also mentioning Cisco? And how many people are also mentioning Juniper and Brocade? And then that percentage is your topical share of voice. And when you could see that increasing, and you begin to see analysts and journalists and influencers sharing content and talking about data centers in your brand, that gets executives excited. They say, wow, Gartner's sharing information about us, or Forrester, let's invest more, or you know what, let's empower more people. So it has to happen in scales. Starting small is certainly the best bet. I think that there's a lot of studies. I just read one on Mashable not too long ago of the behavior of fans on Facebook after they like you. But if they're anything like me, I just don't like them in the first place, unless it's a case study or something. But there's a really good tool that you can use. There's several. It's what's called a social relationship management platform. There's Spreadfast, there's Sprinkler, there's SynCap's platform, there's Shoutlet, and it's simply a CMS platform that allows you to publish to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and WordPress from one single platform. What it tells you is it gives you what's called real-time analytics. So it'll tell you, based on the content that you're sharing, the impact, right? Is it content that people actually like? Was there a significant drop-off of likes after you shared a piece of content? Was there a significant increase in shares or comments? So it gives you kind of a real-time analysis of their behavior after you're sharing content. And you can adjust your editorial strategy based on that real-time analytics. Basically, yes. It's real-time. And that's important. Because if you keep spamming people, and there's certainly best practices, right? For example, we tell our clients, post twice a day on Facebook. And we have certain times. And we've done an analysis that says, you get the most engagement at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or whatever the times are. Those are when you get the most engagement. So we day part. We create content based on previous history. In fact, there's a free tool. Write this down, crowdbooster.com. It's free. It'll tell you, when you create an account, what the optimal time is for you, or the Twitter account that you add to it, to tweet, based on the previous day's engagement. Okay? There's also one called Buffer App, BUFFERAPP.com, free. Same thing. Okay? It'll tell you based on previous day's engagement, and with not robust analytics, but decent, when to tweet. And then there's a lot of, Dan Zarella has the science of sharing. If you Google that, it tells you just at a very high level, tweeting on Fridays at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you'll get the most retweets. Things like that. And you test those and see if it works. Yeah, you're welcome.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You opened your talk by saying that you're a recovering direct marketer.
Yes.
And obviously, on direct marketing, the end result of an interaction, at some point money changes hands. A sale takes place. Where do you, in the world you're inhabiting now, what relationship do you see between this kind of engagement and revenue and sales?
Well, okay, that's a great question. So anybody here use Adobe Photoshop? They're a client. We helped Photoshop go from, I think they had 40,000 fans, and they just hit 3 million, I think a month ago, with 0 paid media. So we did 0 sponsored stories, 0 paid ads. It was all through what I've been talking about, real-time analytics and really good content. They've never once shared a sales message. Okay? So right now, we're in this discussion phase of, okay, now that we've built the community, now that we've earned substantial trust, and people like us, and people engage with us, and people tell us how much they love us, we're going to start testing sales messages. So we're in the process of testing that now. One fan page that I love is NBA. And if you go to the NBA fan page, you're going to find that they share videos and articles and blog posts with the community. And every 5 or 6 posts, there's a link to their e-commerce store. And I bet you there's a strong ROI there. I bet you they're selling products. So, but they're not being overly, and who knows, I don't know if they've tested or not, but they're doing something right. I mean, their fan growth is off the charts.
Is Dan here from the Blazers? He might know that. No? Anybody else got a question? All right.
Thank you
so
again.
much,
I really
Michael.
appreciate your time. Thank you.